Hey guys, Alex from Futurephonic here. I hope you're all doing well. So I had a few questions about how I made the music for the Rhythmizer demos and ads that have been going around. So we're going to take a look at some of those. I want to show you how I set up Rhythmizer for those and also use some of the tracks as a sort of springboard for some other tips and tricks. Specifically the drum and bass demo that I just put out recently. And I was basically doing performances on those, so just a little preview of the performances that you hear in the actual demo. Cool, so I've got just a few knobs lined up here. I don't like having too many knobs, I just get a bit overwhelmed. So I've got the octave spread here on one knob, and so that is increasing the chance that our scale here, which is a custom scale, which I made, I'll just leave that open there, is that we're gonna go up one octave, that some of these notes will shoot up an octave, and I'm actually kind of performing that at the same time roughly in every loop. And when I'm doing that, it's also sending to send B, so that same MIDI knob is sending to this Valhalla vintage verb I've got, just to make that moment a little bit more ambient and playful. Then I guess the more kind of complex modulation I'm doing is, well, I've got the loop knob on just a pad here, then I've got the subdivision on this other control, and this single knob is doing subdivision, but it's also doing a lot in the synth. So it's like a single expressive control. So if you just focus here on the loop and subdivisions, you can see how I'm capturing a few notes and then ramping up the subdivision speed. And I'm trying to sort of time it as well so that it's actually capturing the notes that I want, because remember, it is randomizing on this scale. I've got the probability very high, so it's almost like an ARP, but it is, it is still randomizing. So what else is on this single expressive knob? If we come over to pigments, I've got all the macros also on that knob. This is where it's like a bit darker, and as I'm bringing into these quicker subdivisions, you're getting more effects. The effects are kind of accentuating that sort of very kind of glitchy sound and making it fly over the mix, as is, you can see I've got it linked to decay as well. So when we are literally looping like 30 seconds, I don't want that to be something that gets lost, and I also want it to be like little ticks, little very short decay ticking sort of sound. Okay, so let's just hear that one more time. And you can hear I didn't actually grab the note that I wanted. I just had to kind of try this a few times until I was hitting the loop at the exact moment that I was hearing that sort of higher note. But of course you could just record everything that you're doing to MIDI, which I would always recommend anyway. And that really takes me to my next point. Okay, so through the demos and the tutorials we've made, we've shown different angles on using Rhythmizer, and we'll take a look at more of those, but we haven't necessarily shown you how to take them forward in a track. So let's talk about how we can capture our melody and take it on from there. I could record our melody in. I do also want to highlight the fact that we've got drag to MIDI now. So I'll just hit play. So let's drag from those triangles into there. And so here's our melody. So at this point, yes, we could just get Rhythmizer out of the game. I've just stopped monitoring it there, so it's now sort of ignoring this Rhythmizer input. We're literally just going on the notes now. So we can sort of find the melody that we like. It's pretty obvious because I've just been looping it, but... maybe those notes. And we still have the expressive knob that I've lined up. But what if we thought about it more as like taking that melody or our own original melodies and using Rhythmizer as more of like a MIDI processor? So I'm going to actually take this MIDI from the synth channel back into the Rhythmizer channel. So we're going to input that into Rhythmizer. I need to just monitor my synth channel again. Now I'm going to obviously have to make some changes to Rhythmizer because we're now sending much more complex melody in, not just that one single note. So if I was to hit play, it would just sound crazy. But if I was to go to maybe more like the sort of octave scale or something like that, and then bring the possible octaves down. This could also be a bit nuts. Now what we've done is we've taken off the randomness of the melody, right? We've got this one melody that the notes aren't going to be changing apart from any octaves that we do. But we still have all the other controls of Rhythmizer. So we've got random gating, velocity, random rhythmic possibilities. We still have the loop button. So ask yourself, how can you use Rhythmizer as a MIDI processor, not just a MIDI generator? Send your own melodies into it. Use something like the octaves here, so it's not going to be adding weird notes to your melodies. And then you can continue to randomize velocity, gating, the rhythm tab, or even the bend mode. And then from there, we also have all of the MIDI automation that we just did. So for instance, the bit crusher was a little bit too much. Now I could edit that further in automation. But I love the idea of feeding Rhythmizer your own melodies, taking that melodic randomness sort of out of the equation and using it more as like a MIDI processor. So let's take a look at some of the other ads that I've made. I'll try to go through the ones that people have asked about. Most of the time that I spent after making the backing tracks was actually on the synth as opposed to Rhythmizer, because I'm using Rhythmizer here. Although I've made my own little scales here, I do work on those, but I've got the probability pretty high, and I've also got the scale direction not so much randomized, but just coming up or down. So I'm using Rhythmizer somewhere between like an ARP and a randomizer. And in the case of this Mood Reels track, I've got a similar sort of setup with the octave spread. And so we're hearing the octave spread again. But I do want to put a little emphasis on this point, which is that Rhythmizer is only going to sound as good as the synth that you're sending its MIDI to. I'm generally spending some time with the custom scales, even working from our own presets, that we've got a growing collection of. But most of the time after I've finished working on the backing tracks is actually spent making the synth sounds. And the reason I'm emphasizing this is there have been a few people who got in touch and said that they didn't feel like Rhythmizer was creating good sounds. But I felt in their cases that the actual reason was that they weren't actually working in the synth as well, and sort of expecting Rhythmizer to just kick out the goods and make any sound good. But if you're interested in getting the results that you're hearing in like our demos and ads, then I would say like just spend loads of time on the synth sounds and the processing, or like hooking up your MIDI controller and automating different aspects of it to make it more expressive. That sort of single multi-control expressive knob actually made it really fun to like jam on Rhythmizer. Let's take a look at some of the other demos I made. Alright, let's break down another one. This isn't actually one that I've sort of finished and published yet, but I think it's sounding kind of cool. So what's going on here? First of all, I'm using the polystack quite heavily. So let's just take these down and hear what it sounds like without those. Okay, so here's a custom scale that I've made. I'll bring the probability down to 0. Let's kind of roll this back. So you're hearing this kind of, I call it folding filters. That's my name for this. I've done a bit of automation on this EQ. So a bit of high passing, but I'm also using Rhythmizer's MIDI map. I've got the Pigments live MIDI map loaded. And I've got this LFO. I'm sending that to Pigments filter. Let's take a look at that. Great. So you can see that modulation happening there. I've got LFO tool just on the volume. Got a bit of stereo spread. I've almost always got Saturn in the chain. So back to Rhythmizer. So I've got my custom scale which I've made. Let's bring up the probability of that. I've got some octave spread going on here as well. So some of these notes are jumping up octaves occasionally. If we go to bend mode, you can see I've got some bend mode happening here. So just enough to make it sound wonky. Let's go to the rhythm page. So here I've got the step sequencer, and I've predetermined the groove. So I didn't want it too random, so it's just happening on those notes. And of course, we've got the polystack chords here. Let's hear it with the loop button. Okay, so I know you've all heard this one before, possibly ad nauseum. But so this is from our main Rhythmizer ad. Again, most of the time here was just spent on setting up some divas. I actually have two lined up here, so I've got this one. I don't actually want to touch the settings. And then this more prominent one, and I'm running a new computer now, so you're going to see some old plugins there. But and so again, it was just a case of making the custom scale. As I showed pretty much in the ad, it was just a case of bringing in the randomization. So random velocity. In both divas, I've got velocity linked to filter. So random velocity, you're hearing just different filter amounts. And then, of course, different gating. And with this one being the first thing you hear in our actual ad for Rhythmizer, it had to be really good. But I also had to perform it because I'm showing you kind of in the space of 16 bars how to make a patch from scratch. So I decided on this custom scale melody here, which I developed. And then it was a case of turning everything to 0 and basically recording performances of me pressing play and slowly turning everything up. I'm not going to turn all these custom scale notes off and put them back in again, but it was a case of, bringing up the velocity. Bring in the actual custom scale notes. And then bringing the whole thing down an octave. Got the octave spread there. A bit more random velocity. Okay, so this was one of our Psytrance sort of mood wheels. So the Rhythmizer that you're hearing So I basically have a quite complex sampler set up. And the sample I took from... So I actually use an AI voice generator to just generate loads of words.
Quantum. Hologram. Cyber. Matrix.
I may have just thought of all the most generic Psytrance words I could think of. And I just put all of those words into a drum machine. Let's just roll off all the effects. And we'll just add them on one at a time. And then I'll show you how I built up the Rhythmizer for it. I guess in my first few years of production, I would just chuck on loads of effects. And then I got to a point where I was using less effects. And now I'm just using loads of effects again. Let's hear what's going on here. Okay, so I'm sending Rhythmizer C1. And we've gone through this in quite a few of our tutorials. It's just hitting all the notes on the chromatic scale, which is literally all the notes. I've got 33 slices. Here you can see I've got 33 slices that I created from these words. So I've probably got, yep, 33 slices there. So it's randomly choosing from these slices. And you can see as well that I've got a lot of gating. I've also got the step sequencer. I do have the loop control mapped, but I'm not sure if I actually used it for the demo. Let's start putting the effects back on. So got some EQ. Straight into some L2. I didn't want this to be dynamic. I just wanted it to be in your face. Into some Oig Sound Soothe. Just for some sibilance. Into Serum Effects. So this is where you can hear the comb filtering. And then another Serum Effects. Okay, so you're hearing two of these sort of flange comb style filters in a row. And then on the actual group channel, we've got more effects. So probably hitting those lows again. And then I wanted the transients to be actually poking through the mix, so got some transects happening. Got some Saturn, and this is just saturation, just to level it out a bit more. Pro and B, I mean, I use this all the time. Just make sure those lows are protected. My favorite delay, Valhalla delay. Because the diffusion is turned up, it's sounding like somewhere between a delay and a reverb. Love that. And then as usual, the M stereo expander. Probably get away with even a bit more. Got a little bassline layer. Very quiet bit of atmosphere, which is being automated. The kick and bass was actually made by Dan Divination for their Pulses 2 demo that he made. And then drums. And then the first part of this track was actually a different Rhythmizer, which was this one. There's no mapping going on. So same again, custom scale, quite low probability to keep a lot of the kind of input note happening. Lots of automation on the filter. Meta flanger. the glue compressor in parallel. This is one of Virtual Light's presets, which I modified. So really most of what you're hearing after Rhythmizer is just fairly intense filtering, which again, coming back to the main point, I did spend quite a while like dialing all this in. Oh, I wondered where those little glitches were coming from, and it's from this fab filter with the smudge control. Absolutely awesome. I just don't use that one enough. Okay, so we've taken a look at how you can use a MIDI controller to set up a single, like, multi-expressive control. I really recommend taking the time with that one. Then we looked at taking Rhythmizer's MIDI output and actually sending that back into Rhythmizer with like the octave scale, and using Rhythmizer as more of like a MIDI processor. So sending your own melodies into Rhythmizer as opposed to relying on it to generate melodies, and possibly even recycling that process. And then kind of putting an emphasis on the fact that, you know, a huge part of the reason that the demos and ads sound the way that they do is because I do spend ages on the sounds themselves, on the synth parts, getting the mix all nicely. So let me know in the comments if you guys have any more questions. I'm totally up for doing more of these videos. If you feel like there's something that I've missed or something you want to look at even closer, let me know. We read all the comments. And yeah, happy producing, guys. Keep rocking. Chat soon. Bye.